Welcome to Privilege and Protest, Chicagoland's wealthy western suburbs in this latest iteration of social upheaval and the newest crossroads of privilege and protest. I'm Dominic, and today, Monday, June 15th, 2020, I'm joined by two organizers of several of the daytime protests in Naperville, Indya and Pam. Indya, we'll start with you. What's your connection to Naperville here?
Well, I grew up in Naperville. I went to Naperville Central High School, where I encountered a lot of racist incidents that really impacted my high school career. I initially started by organizing the Black and Latino Association, which had already existed but had died down. And given the circumstances of my senior year of high school and all of the negativity and stigma surrounding the implicit bias of racism that was going on in the school, I felt the need to do something active about it. So I worked with the school climate committee. I worked with the principal, with district leaders, etc., throughout the school year, and I really got involved with my school community. And then I joined the NAACP and was alerted by all of the current events that have been happening surrounding racism in the United States of America. And recently I've been working within Naperville to sort of spread the word about it, because there's a lot of things that non-people of color don't even see in Naperville. It's very fogged over, especially by our elected representatives and officials here. So these protests were something that I got into organizing because I needed people to see what was happening and to feel it, be there and present and inconvenienced by it.
Yeah, certainly seizing the moment for sure. Pam, how about yourself? What's your connection to Naperville?
Well, I came to Naperville to go to North Central, which I just recently graduated again with a master's degree. So I've been in the area for about 6 years now. And I just think that I grew up in a very different environment, and then coming here to a primarily white neighborhood and area, I was just like everyone says, we're in a bubble here. And it's just, I think this has brought that awareness of hey, you're actually not in a real bubble and you should burst that out.
Yeah, a lot of that going around. I saw from the protests and various people of color. I also, for context, I also went to North Central College for 4 to 5 years, and it was different. It was definitely different. I was born and raised in Downers Grove, which is its own bubble of privilege and what have you. But Filipino household, going to Naperville and North Central College, I definitely felt that there is a different feeling at North Central and just Naperville as a whole. But let's set the stage for your guys' involvement with these protests. Which protests of the past? I think there's been 4 big ones in the past couple weeks. Which protests were you either or both of you responsible for organizing?
So the protest that happened on June 4th, on Thursday, I was responsible for organizing, and I also did a little bit of the I suppose representing work on the protest that happened on Monday, as I went and spoke to the mayor and got contact information from Mayor Cherico. And I believe I was speaking to the sheriff as well when the giant crowd of people lined in front of the police station and then had no afterwards.
This is June 1st, right? Monday, June 1st? Yeah.
Yes. So I felt the need to step in and give it some direction and make some demands, because we just kind of had an angry mob standing at the police department, which can have ended well unless we did something. And that's very similar to what I did on Thursday as well. Someone had started organizing a protest with no direction. The other organizer had just decided, I'm going to have a protest this Thursday. We're going to go march on Thursday. And then that was it. And I was like, oh, that can end very poorly. Mm-hmm. That can end very negatively. And that could actually get people killed. So I stepped in that time and I got the NAACP involved, as well as a couple other members of the African-American community. I set up speakers. I got involved with the Park District, and I spoke to the Chief of Police, Bob Marshall, as well, to get endorsement so that we had the streets blocked off for when we lined Washington.
Wow. How about Pam? Actually, I should also ask for context. Did you guys work together on this, on either of these? And Pam, I guess you can answer that.
No, I actually did not know Indya. I went to the protest she organized on Thursday. I was there, and I've seen her her face on multiple person's
Yeah.
photos, and like I saw her around that day. But I how I became involved, it was this past like a week ago. The first protest was that organized by someone but didn't have a leader, and no one showed up that day. And me and another two individuals decided that, hey, like, what are we gonna do? Are we just gonna chill here? Like, what is the purpose of us gathering here today? And just we decided that it was best that we had like a plan to like march and make sure that everyone stayed safe, and just just had a focus on what we were doing, and just not standing there, not doing anything, and looking like, what are we doing? And the same thing happened on Wednesday. Organizers just didn't show up, and I was the one person of the previous march that was there, and I was like, okay, well, we'll go to Washington and stand there. And clearly we had people inconvenienced about that, and that's what I think it's necessary in this kind of area. Like, understand that just because you're inconvenienced for like a second amount of your day, like an hour or two, that doesn't mean that your life is over. But like from people like of color being inconvenienced by being pulled over for an hour or two, this could mean their lives. So like it's just a portion of that kind of reckonings of like, hey, like this might be an inconvenience for me, but for other people, this is their lives.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction, especially when you kind of elevate that inconvenience to something like property damage that can really color how a whole movement is seen and interpreted for the mass audience. Because like I said, like I was mentioned before earlier, no one's gonna really see all of these protests one by one as reported by the news. Maybe a small article, but usually by and large they'll see the big riots, the protests, a few broken windows, which, I'm not saying is a good thing that happened, but nothing compared to someone losing their life. Certainly, like we see in George Floyd and many other of these cases. I guess we'll get right to that as well. What are your thoughts on the vandalism that took place on Monday night, June 1st, after the peaceful protests? Either of you?
Well, I know for almost certain that after the protests left the police station, we walked down Washington, and we took a knee at the corner of, I think it was Benton and Washington, and we took a knee for 9 minutes, and then I got on the we took a knee, and then there were people on megaphones first, okay. And most of the people that were there peacefully protesting, they were gone. Mm-hmm. And after that point, it was people that came in secondhand, and my commentary on the vandalism secondhand is it doesn't bother me, because I genuinely do not think it was associated with the cause. And I also know for a fact that you do not own a business in downtown Naperville and not have insurance.
Right. Yeah. And even then I understand that it can be dangerous, because by the way, if you ever see me break eye contact, it's because I'm looking stuff. I have like multiple monitors. So I'm looking at stuff here. The night of those protests, a man did get stabbed. 21-year-old, this is named in the article, Jai Taylor. Mm-hmm. He wound up with 20 staples in his stomach, and it can be very chaotic. Those riots, or riots, to have it I don't know. That's such an interesting term for me, because that can be applied to anything from like a sports riot to which is a bunch of people celebrating too far, to something a little more legitimate, such as racial tension. But it can be very tricky to kind of balance that issue. Not just, certainly someone got stabbed, and that's definitely not good, but to try to distance yourself away from the protests, I know that's something that's always weighing on someone's mind, for someone who's leading and organizing those, and it's a hard thing just to kind of control the narrative in that sense. I guess going to that, I know, Pam, did you have something to say to that as well?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to follow up with the news. I was there on Monday too. And then after the knee, like she said, there was people telling us like, hey, like, go home. Like, we accomplished what we wanted. They heard us, go home. And I even stayed behind. I live close to downtown Naperville. So I was like, I'm going to stay behind, make sure that if people that are staying behind, like, don't get I don't know, approached by the police and be like, hey, like, they told you to leave now, kind of that kind of it. And I do remember seeing people like kind of bunching up in the intersection again. But what I understood that was a different set of protesters, not the original group of the
Mhm.
protest. Um, and I had a friend who was there that night when things happened, and she told me, just because I contacted her, like, "Hey, are you safe? Are you okay?" She said that most of the people that were protesting, as soon as the firecracker went off, they all ran off the street. So the people that were actually like downtown Naperville, they were like a complete set of people.
Yeah.
I think just that was the whole idea of like, where are the protesters and like who did actually went down.
Mhm. And just to clarify, I believe India, you said that when it came time for the protests to end, you told the protest, the protest that you had been leading and organizing, either impromptu or not, to disperse, because I believe was it in accordance to what the police were saying to disperse, or was it more so that you sensed something was not going to go right once sunset had hit?
On Thursday or Monday?
This is Monday.
On Monday, I didn't personally know any information, but I also wasn't the one who told everyone to go. It was
Okay.
two young men that did that. I didn't hear any tips or anything. I know on Thursday, I definitely heard a lot of tips about how the police and the National Guard were going to come in at 5:30, so everyone needed to be off the streets then. And I took action to disperse everyone on Thursday, but Monday, I didn't know of any police action that was going to be happening.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that Thursday incident where things almost escalated to a good degree there. But let's get into what you guys are really doing this for. What are the goals of these Naperville-centric protests, either on a cultural or legislative level?
I think speaking on the cultural level, for like someone that came to Naperville for college and kind of that idea of like, oh, this is such a great place to like live. Um, I've experienced both sides of it. Yes, it's a wonderful place to live. It's very peaceful. I love having that privilege of like walking outside and feeling quote unquote safe. Um, but I've also have experienced a part of like, I've had family visit and like we primarily speak Spanish, and I've had people just looked at me weird because I'm talking with like my sister or my uncle or someone um on the phone, or like when they came to visit. And it's just like, I think there has to be that part of learning and respect towards other people that needs to be learned within this community, that I don't think a lot of people understand that. Just and I think the biggest thing for me is seeing how many young people are attending this protest and are leading them, just like India is. Um, and it gives me a little bit of hope that the next generation of Naperville adults will be better equipped.
Yeah, from what I've seen, it's mostly high schoolers, mostly white, and a much younger audience, as I said. But logistically, it works out too that this was the end of the school year. I think, well, actually, school had long been canceled, I believe, because of the ongoing coronavirus that undeniably has kind of set up a dry tinder for this whole protest. I believe, I think the sociological cause and effect is pretty much stated that, yeah, a lot of this may not necessarily have happened had it not been for coronavirus, with 40 million people unemployed, school being let out, or school just not happening. So I guess to that advantage, many people, including yourselves or organizers, really were able to seize the moment. But I guess now is as good a time as any to do it. So it's just astounding to see, and I think it's safe to say that consistency is the key to kind of breaking that seal of privilege or that bubble, putting a pin to it, and putting in people's faces kind of consistency throughout the various months here. How long do you believe you'll be able to sustain this movement in Naperville specifically?
I foresee this going on until we get actual review of the our police department and actual action taken. One of the things that I've been advocating for is taking a look at the police union, because right now, if someone, one of the statistics that really bothers me is that if someone sues a police officer specifically for doing something egregious against them, harming them or doing something against the law, the city automatically pays that lawsuit and not the police officer, which means that the citizens of the city who are paying taxes to the city are paying for that officer's lawsuit. And that makes it really easy for a police officer to continue doing things with no consequences and no financial pocket. And as someone who genuinely believes that commerce is king, I think the way to get reform and change is to hit someone in the pocketbook, so that's something that I want to see. I want to see a review of the police union, and I want to see a review of qualified immunity as well, because that is egregious in my opinion.
Yeah, Pam, anything to say to that in terms of or actually you already mentioned like culturally and Indya, more.
I think at that point too, just like Indya says, just a review of like what our police officers are being held accountable to. And I mentioned this in one of the interviews I did with NCTV, like how is it possible that our police department and even like just the people that attend and supposed to protect us have such a low quality of training on like any sort of aspect. Like they don't have enough training on like I'm going to lost the word.
Is it just de-escalation?
Yeah, de-escalating, or like even just conflict resolution. Like how does it come that they're not trained enough for that? But like someone like a resident hall assistant, or like even me, that I may or may not go work into a college or a company, I have more training in schooling in conflict resolution than a police officer.
Yeah, it's go ahead.
Sorry. Police officers in Naperville actually have well over the national average, above 101 hours of training. Naperville officers, I believe the number that the FOIA requested was 177 hours of training. So alternatively, I don't personally agree that it's that they don't have de-escalation training. I more so believe that it is the reason that they behave the way they do and as aggressively as they do towards people of color and or minorities is because of because a lot of the officers that work in Naperville aren't actually even from Naperville. There's another issue that I think attributes to the fact that they are able to behave so aggressively towards people of color and towards just anyone that they're supposed to be protecting and serving in the first place, is the concept of them seeing themselves as above us, because they're armed ridiculously. They're armed with military weapons.
Yeah, I took pictures of their equipment on the various protests. Right. I'll put that on the screen.
Yeah. You can't expect someone to not go on a power trip if they're told over and over and over again, hey, you're allowed to use force on these people.
Yeah, the popular saying is that if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I believe for Naperville, I'm looking at this right now, is this at December 2019. So Fraternal Order of Police, FOP, Lodge 42. And in terms of specifics concerning Naperville, I'll have to study up more on that. Indya, you certainly touched on that as well. But I know I listened to the Daily podcast from the New York Times, and they had a great episode on the systems that protect the police on various levels, from just trusting police reports implicitly without any investigation or oversight, lack of civilian accountability. That's a huge thing in the city of Chicago right now, is how do you implement that with CPAC or all these like 4 different initial name proposals. And of course the police unions, which is kind of a misnomer, because to my knowledge, unions are meant to protect workers from management, as you guys well know. But for the police in particular, it's a very peculiar thing where the police appear to be I can't speak to Naperville specifically, but nationally we have seen that police unions oftentimes protect the police departments from accountability from the people, and oftentimes working with that management, such as police chiefs or any lack of civilian oversight. And it's just amazing how deep the well goes, and it's such an ingrained thing which runs in parallel with the privilege here that we have in Naperville, no doubt. It's a deep problem. So I mean, just trying to get specific examples, try to illustrate that. Are there any specific examples of mismanagement from the NPD, Naperville Police Department, the police chief,
Absolutely.
city council, or Mayor Steve Chirico? Yeah, Indya.
Yes. So just this November, my father was followed for 2 miles, and then he was pulled over in our no outlet neighborhood in our driveway, in front of our neighbors, in front of my little brother watching from the window. And as the only Black family in this neighborhood, you can imagine what impression that left. Is this what happens when Black people move into a neighborhood in Naperville? Makes us look even more like we don't belong. She pulled him over because she ran his license plate and found a warrant that was actually not even under his name, for his arrest in California. And then she verbally was very, very aggressive with him, and she told him that he would not be allowed to drive in Naperville without risk of being pulled over unless he went and called California to figure this warrant out, which again was not even in his name. So he was absolutely racially profiled in Naperville. And when they wrote a formal letter and a formal statement and brought it up to the police, the police department kept it so under wraps that the chief of police did not even catch wind of it until my parents directly went to him, to his office with the letter. They tried to hide it basically from their superiors.
Yeah, well, there's your lack of civilian accountability in action there. So just to accentuate the point, make it brazenly clear, the officer pulled up a warrant and didn't even check to see if it was under your father, right? Under your father's name. It just correlated it.
It correlated. It was similar to his first and last name, but the middle initial was incorrect, right?
And it was actually all the way in California.
Well, yes.
Wow,
my father in California in maybe 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah, and just kind of assumed that, and that easily could have escalated into something else. And not. I mean, I'm sure you've already thought this, but that could have been another incident there, because as we know, the big name of many names is Breonna Taylor, who was murdered in her sleep from a no-knock raid from the police, and she wasn't. It was correct me, because all these.
It was wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Because all these cases are kind of blending together, sadly enough. But yeah, Breonna Taylor, she wasn't even the person they were looking for, right? And
right.
So that's wow. And yeah, so that goes back to Pam about your de-escalation. And wow, Pam, do you have any specific examples from the city council or police departments?
Not particularly. I've been again, the word privilege, that I've never been in that situation, but that doesn't mean that can never happen to me. Someone who is also part of a minority group in Naperville, and obviously a minority group that is more prominent, the Hispanic community and Latino community, but that doesn't mean that can't happen. And I think that is why I would like to bring this attention also to like our Hispanic community, like, hey, like this is not the point of comparing struggles. Like this could happen to us too. And this is when we stand with like our people of color brothers and sisters, like, hey, I'm here for you, and I'm here with you. But I can't tell from experience. I've never experienced that. And Indya, I'm so sorry that happened to your dad. I think that's the worst thing ever. But I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah. It's more amp.
Yep.
That's real shit. So just beyond the police and the city council, businesses as well can really dominate. As you mentioned, go for the pocketbooks, follow the money. What changes can Naperville businesses make to better support the movement?
Oh boy, I have a lot.
Go for it.
Well, first off, there's been several instances of businesses being racist in Naperville, period. I mean, we had the Buffalo Wild Wings incident. Yep. We've had a incident just recently at Jewel Osco that happened on Mother's Day for racial profiling. We had an incident happen at Buc-ee's, a gas station. There are a lot of things businesses can make, but I'm more so concerned on the changes that people who are shopping at businesses can make, because they're the ones that really control it. I mean, they're the ones who are putting money in these people's pockets. I know I personally don't ever shop at Hobby Lobby or Chick-fil-A, because I know that both corporations have a history of being racially insensitive and or racist, just flat out, and or LGBTQ plus phobic, etc. So businesses themselves can look at why people aren't shopping at their businesses and acknowledge and or make statements. I mean, Jewel still has not made a statement against the blatant racial profiling that happened to the woman who was who had an issue on Mother's Day. I mean, they didn't even fire the person who did it.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah, no, she's
Wow.
still working, which is egregious.
I didn't even know about the Jewel Osco one. I did know about the Buffalo Wild Wings one. I think that's the biggest one, because apparently it got Reverend Al Sharpton involved. It made like news nationally, like a small little thing there, because it's that's crazy. And for those who don't know, providing context, the Buffalo Wild Wings incident, which is just hilarious, the most Naperville thing, right? But no, but really up and down, it affects everyone. But yeah, the Buffalo Wild Wings incident is when a couple asked the restaurant to move an already seated table of 18 people of color because they just didn't want to be around them. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's basically what it was. And
exactly.
According to the statement from Mary Vall, who was named in the article here, a couple minutes by, and the host went up to my husband and asked, "What race are you guys?" So imagine being asked, you're just going to a restaurant on a Tuesday night because you want to forget about the business of life, and then you get asked by the server or the host, "What race are you guys?" That, to me, that is like segregation stuff. Like that's stuff you think about, you wouldn't think to hear unless you were like in the 50s, and that's something else. So I mean, those are great examples there, and wow, I think it's important. Another big thing that was called for in the protests was supporting Black businesses and businesses owned by people of color. Do you have any examples of businesses owned by people of color in Naperville that should be supported?
Yes. My father actually owns a couple businesses, one of which is Red Tape Healthcare. Or my father is Black. He also owns a company which sells Boost, which is like an oxygen tank product. It's kind of interesting. Those are a couple examples.
Pam, do you know of any?
I don't particularly know of any, but I've had, and this is me being a bookworm. I've particularly started searching for places in the Chicago area that may deliver to the suburbs as well. I particularly been looking at, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Semicolon bookstore and gallery in the city. They are having, they were closed for the coronavirus and everything, but now they are doing back all orderings and shipping. And so you can order books from them. And now with the new kind of like restrictions lifted in the city, you can go visit them in certain limited hours. And I think they have like a wonderful place. I was there over the weekend. I tried to go, but unfortunately I went on the wrong time because I didn't know the hours. But from the outside, it looks really wonderful, and I've placed an order for a couple of books that I don't know if it's good or bad, but a lot of them are back order because it's all about getting knowledge and keep learning right now about the different injustices in the systems in the states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Semicolon. I'm looking it up here. Semicolon bookstore in Chicago, Halsted Street. Apparently open Tuesday. It's special hours because I'm sure with the coronavirus and being a smaller business, the hours can get a little all over the place. But yeah, that's another great one. Again, so Indya dropped out. She is on her cell phone. I believe she was at like 26% battery when before we even started. So I'm sure she'll pop in at some point, or maybe not, but we'll see. But actually, Pam, this one's directed towards you. Is that what personal changes that can individuals in Naperville? I think we touched on this earlier, but as they pass by, seeing these sustained protests hopefully sustained protests, at the corner of Chicago and Washington throughout Route 59 is the one we're going to bring up next, this in a couple weeks. But as people drive by and they see all these people holding these signs and seeing these things kind of inconvenience them and what have you, what are the things that you hope that people take away? What are the ideas and messages that people take away from these protests?
Well, first of all, and I think this is going for everyone, even I've done this myself. When previous movements of Black Lives Matter have come to light, I was not as involved as I am now. And I think that was just part of me being very unaware of my own privileges as the Hispanic and Latino community. I think we sometimes overlook those things. And it wasn't until I had to have a hard conversation with my mom's partner of him asking me like if I would date a Black guy, and I had to come up forward and be like, why not? Like if he's a nice guy, if he treats me nice and he's respectful and I like him, like why not? Why would that be a thing that would stop me? So just becoming aware of our own privileges and like educating ourselves on those issues. I think that's the most important thing. Keep reading, knowing about why we're doing this. Why are people protesting? Read about that. It's not only, and I've been saying this to people that I cross paths with, I think it's not only George Floyd. It's all about all of this other names that we keep hearing about, Breonna Taylor, all the people that recently were lynched in California. I don't know if you're aware with those cases.
Okay, no, I was not aware of this.
There was 4 people that have been in the past week or so have been lynched, and 2 of them have been in California.
Jesus.
One of them being a young Black man hanging on the tree outside the police station. So keep reading about these issues because this is going to be a long haul, and I don't think this is going anywhere anytime soon, and it shouldn't be, because the way we used to live our lives didn't work for everyone.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. I'm just reading this article now. I think, jeez, I'm sorry for the smiling. That's just how I get through processing all this depressing shit. Oh my God.
Yeah.
When was the last time someone got straight up lynched? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and it's been brutal suicide, but clearly, why? I just that is unprecedented.
I'll
I
have to
think
read
it's
up
crazy.
about that, sadly, but okay. Yeah, you were mentioning that. Educating yourself, and you had collected books from the Semicolon store. I know I had recently just watched, because they're free on streaming. Is Just Mercy by Michael B. Jordan, and Selma. Selma is free now as well, which is the Martin Luther King Jr. movie, which oddly enough beforehand we had not had a mainstream big budget Martin Luther King Jr. movie beforehand, to my knowledge anyway. But nothing on a blockbuster level. So do you have anything else to recommend in terms of books or media or what have you?
I think there's a lot of now information online about the things that you can watch, but I still want to keep moving forward with watch Mercy. That is one way the justice system has failed Black people and Black male people in general. And if there's the opportunity for people to get the book, that goes in so much more depth on how the justice system has failed minorities. And this is I'm reading the book, or more like listening the book. I've got the audiobook, and I didn't know how bad minor incarceration was for people of color, and even like Latino and Hispanic communities. It is absolutely bonkers. They were sentencing people, 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds, to life in sentence for minor misdemeanors, and I think it's bonkers. But in Netflix, if you have Netflix, there's so many things you can watch, such as like 13, When They See Us, so many important films, miniseries. I believe Hulu did also this thing where they categorize all of the shows or stories that you might want to watch just to get educated on this topic, and it's just a list of movies, miniseries, documentaries that people should watch just to educate themselves. And if people don't want to get into the political side of the system and just want to learn more about how people live, simple books and movies just like The Help can show you how people who are in a position of being seen as less for being someone that helps around the house can be treated. And if you want to go into the kind of the easy way to ease into it, just watch Hairspray. Jesus.
Yeah, that's a real easy way of getting into it. But hey, you know what? In terms of trying to break that bubble in Naperville and in many other communities, we know Naperville the best, or at least I do. But it's such a different climate. It's not bad. I don't mean to demonize it. I don't think any of us mean to demonize it, because it is a home. It is a place that we care about. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this in the first place. Trust me. But it's so palpable. And if you're watching this and maybe you're thinking, "Oh, Naperville's not like that," I challenge you to rethink that notion. Any which way you can do it. It has never been easier here in the year 2020. Well, maybe it was a little easier before coronavirus, but it was never been easier here in 2020 to educate yourself. Just watch a movie that's streaming, because you have so much free time now because you're unemployed, and all these free movies are coming.
All the time in the world.
Exactly, and and I should also say from the opposite end, you're not going to watch one movie and suddenly you're on the level of India, who's working with the NAACP. No, certainly not. But just exposing yourself to it and slowly laying the groundwork for that empathy.
Just try to better yourself in those educational topics that we should all know. And this is something that I've seen online. And this image and war resonated with me so much, is like, we are responsible to become more ethical and better than the society we grew up in. And I think that comes hand in hand with like learning how to have those hard conversations with our family members or friends that might not get into the topic as passionately as some of us might. And I can even tell you this, I know, like, I'm nowhere close to being as educated and informed as India is. Like, we are in two different levels and in completely different age groups. I'm not sure how old she is, but I can tell you as a 24-year-old, I have wavelengths to go to where she's at.
But you got to start somewhere, and for someone who may be watching this who has no idea what we're talking about, cannot relate at all to these incidents that we're talking about, start somewhere. And I should always say that, the name of our show is Privilege, and my silly little YouTube show is Privilege and Protest. I don't know, it's alliterated, so I thought it sounded good. But I should also note that I am part of that privilege, well endowed. But there's nothing wrong with being born into privilege, right? No one's going to blame you at age 3 for being born to wealthy parents, or growing up with all the blessings of a white society, or being white. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with being born into that. The problem is, by the time you grow up, grow into adulthood, get unleashed into the world, I would say it's impossible to not have been exposed, especially in our overly connected world, especially on social media, to not be exposed to the issues of white privilege, of privilege from wealth, privilege of where you're born, and all the various forms of it. To not be exposed to that's a mighty tall task. So by the time you grow into these things, it's time. It's time now more than ever, and I'm talking about myself here, so don't worry. But now more than ever to just wake up to what's going on. I did want to touch on one more thing, kind of a hard left here, but in terms of all these sustained protests, which I wholly support, showing my bias there, and certainly you and India are working hard to maintain. COVID-19 is still a threat, with many states beginning to report an increase in new cases. and all that pointing towards the dreaded second wave. How do you reconcile this dynamic of showcasing solidarity, keeping the movement alive, while keeping the protesters safe from this virus?
Correct. Fully aware of that.
Yeah.
Have not lost touch on the pandemic.
Yeah.
But as many organizers and people around the protest, there's been a full encouragement of and ask that everyone who attends protest first and foremost shows up wearing a mask. We're not going to tell you go away if you're not, but it is necessary that you recognize that everyone around you is wearing a mask for a reason. Like, we're not wearing it just to be like, hey, like, we're wearing a mask because, you know, we should. We're asking everyone to show up with a mask. And I haven't seen this a lot in the protests in Naperville, but I've actually experienced it firsthand. Yesterday, I attended a drag march in Boys Town in Chicago. The amount of volunteers handing out hand sanitizer, mask, it's incredible. I never expected seeing that in a million years, but they're giving us more than our government did when we needed it, or that our government has given the people that are saving lives. And goes back to the issue of police departments on a place just like Naperville. Why do we have to spend millions of dollars in riot gear? And we have people in our hospitals wearing plastic bags or not being able to change their masks in 3 days because there's not enough. So I think that's part of it. Like, I think we need to realize that we're still taking care of each other as we attend this protest, because we understand that there's still a bigger threat in hand for many people that can be compromised for this virus. And as well, a lot of the protesters, and this is me talking about people I know that have attended a protest in the city of Chicago, which obviously draw way multiple numbers that we see here. They're being encouraged to get tested as much as they can in the multiple free testing sites that there are. CVSs are providing tests freely. There's a lot of other places that are giving tests freely. So they're being encouraged to go. If they're keeping going to protest, hey, make sure that you are isolating yourself and treat, after you've gone to a protest, treat as you had the virus. Yeah. Take care of yourself, isolate yourself.
Yeah, no, I've kind of attending these protests in a journalistic fashion, which is how I met Pam here. And I every time I come home from these things, and they can get a little bit close quarters, which is just, again, that weird dichotomy of trying to show solidarity, but virus. I immediately it's gonna sound weird. I just take off all my clothes, put them in the washer, go upstairs, take a shower, and take no chances, because that is it's a mingling of people. And recently, with the recent protests last Thursday, or in the past couple weeks, I believe they've started having a kind of a small tradition that I guess that's building up, where everyone comes together at the corner of Chicago and Washington, overtake the intersection, and kneel and show solidarity. But at the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, and I hope someone doesn't have the virus. But that comes back to the risk that you take, and really what you're marching for, which is trying to break this lack of care for people of color, specifically the black experience in America, where people are getting killed in their sleep from no-knock raids, and just trying to show that solidarity. And it's so tricky. But I like to think it's a better cause than what was seen about a month ago, 2 months ago, where the protests there were more so, hey, let us get our hair cut.
And if you compare them side to side, who's showing up with masks? Did they?
Mm-hmm.
Did they care? Not really. And I get it. They were trying to protest. I can't breathe. Different I can't breathe situations.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can perfectly breathe underneath a mask. that you don't like your smelly ass breath, that's your problem, Karen.
Eat a myth, but oh boy, we could go on. We could keep on going on and on. But I believe the next protest plan that you guys are aware of, you in India, is the 27th.
I believe so.
Yeah, and we can. I'll put more information or put in the description and share more online. But I believe it's going to take place somewhere along Route 59. And again, this is all in India's knowledge, who unfortunately dropped out. So we'll reiterate this information, but it's along Route 59, and I believe it's in coalition with the NAACP and various other groups, so it has their blessing. So I believe this is going to be a bigger one, along with various smaller ones that are popping up. I think there was one, like a 20-person protest near a Jewel Osco, I think in relation to the racial incident, racial profiling incident there. But any more that you know of off the top of your head?
Not right now. I know I was trying to get into the works of possibly just have like we said, educational rally about the issue.
Yeah.
And like we've mentioned, there's a lot of young people that are attending this protest. So the whole idea of this is to make them aware of how much they can have an impact on making a change, and having a table where they can register to vote if they don't know how to do it on their own. But it's still in the works. Just trying to make sure that we do everything the right way, by everyone's means.
Yeah, this is an election year. I keep forgetting that too. It's an election year where one of the candidates was impeached and acquitted. I keep forgetting that happened.
Yeah, and that's why for the past, like, the two protests that you've seen me lead, I reiterate every time I speak to them before we leave, like, hey, make sure you're aware that you need to vote. Like, this is how we get things on voting. Because like we saw, he can get impeached, but if we don't vote him out, he's not going to leave. Yeah,
exactly. I've seen it said online on social media that this movement needs to fire on all cylinders. So absolutely protesting, but also don't forget about that pivotal voting as well, which I'll just say real quick that any amount of voter fraud or voter suppression can be overcome. I mean, first of all, they shouldn't happen. First and foremost, absolutely take every step to stamp that out. But a certain degree of suppression and interference there can be overcome just by the sheer amount of people coming out to vote. That can make things clear as day. Otherwise, that's a certain level of interference that I think is a little harder to cover up. But regardless, yes, keeping that in mind, keeping the protests in mind, keeping voting in mind. Pame Gomez, thank you so much for your time, taking the time to talk with literally one guy with. This is going to be my first video on the YouTube channel. So, I mean, I don't know if this channel is going to last for a month or it's going to keep on going. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you absolutely to Indya Smith-Johnson, sharing her incredible stories and her incredible, amazing work. I was like, I know I got a lot of catching up to do. And apologies for my inappropriate smiling and blabbering on. I'm still getting used to this. A lot of my journalism work was through music, so it's a little different, the topics here, but I can't wait to dive deeper into it. So thank you so much for watching, Pam. Thank you so much.
No problem.